Welcome back to University English 2, the skills, and we are looking now at Unit 2, Academia, also known as Essential Academic Writing Skills. Now we'll begin with an introduction, and then we'll look at the writing process, and then we'll look at paragraphing and academic writing. Now, with academic writing, we'll be particularly looking at paragraphs, essays, assignments, and journal articles. And then we'll be looking at skills, academic skills associated with writing. In particular, the skill of paraphrasing, credibility, objectivity, summaries, and referencing. And then at the end, we'll be conducting our own summary. Virginia Woolf, in A Room of One's Own in 1929, wrote, "Lock up your libraries if you like, but there is no gate, no lock, no bolt that you can set upon the freedom of my mind." Now, knowledge of how to write well is really essential for both academic and professional success. And following the writing process will always help you to ensure that your written work is of the highest quality. Now, when writing longer pieces, clear and succinct sentences are placed together to form coherent paragraphs, which can then themselves be combined to form longer works, such as essays, assignments, or even journal articles. To support ideas well, you need to be able to effectively research credible sources and then summarize and paraphrase these works, all the while avoiding plagiarism by correctly citing references. Let's start then with the writing process. Understand that written communication is by its nature meant to be preserved. In the past, this was the only way in which we could actually transmit knowledge to later generations with reasonable accuracy. Thus, the era before writing was invented is regarded as prehistory, before history. Now today, all of your written words are likely, whether you like it or not, recorded somewhere. And these words may in fact come back to haunt you someday if they are said in haste and without a forethought. So be very cautious of all of your written correspondence, even if it is just a simple text message. Now, this caution can actually become a habit if we follow the writing process and if we apply the writing process to all of our written communications, regardless of how short or how mundane, everyday they might seem to be. Now, the writing process is quite simply a checklist of things to do in a preferred order when you are writing. Now, the first thing you want to do is to choose a topic, and then you want to brainstorm and research about that topic. And then you want to organize, think about the order in which you're going to write things. Altogether, this is known as pre-writing. And then you want to start drafting, and that will include the writing itself and editing your writing. And then finally, you want to submit your work, which is the delivery itself of your work. Let's take a look at these aspects. So step one is choosing a topic. Now, Often when you are writing, a topic is going to be predetermined. That means before you start writing, you probably already know what it is that you're going to write about. There are other examples. So, for example, if you're going to reply to a text or reply to an email, then in those cases, the person who sent you the original text or email has already chosen the topic, and you are replying in relation to that topic. Now, when you are creating a new communication, you probably already have a topic in mind, perhaps one related to your studies, one related to your job, or perhaps one related to your interests at the time. Now, for academic writing, sometimes your topic might actually be given to you, such as when a teacher might ask you to write about a particular issue. And sometimes you may simply be asked to choose your own topic. You may be invited to choose a topic maybe within a particular field, but you have the freedom to choose. Remember, though, in all cases, even if the topic is chosen for you, you will have an opinion or a viewpoint about that particular topic. And this is what we refer to as the main or the controlling idea. And largely this is yours to choose. What is your opinion? What is your viewpoint about the topic that you are discussing? Brainstorming, research, and organization. Now, to brainstorm simply means to think about the topic. To research means to find out more about the topic, in particular, finding out more about what other people have already said or already discovered about it. Organizing is deciding where you're going to place your arguments in your communication and how best you wish to convey your particular message. Now, altogether, these 3 steps, the choosing a topic, thinking about your main idea, and then going ahead and doing some research, brainstorming, and organization, altogether, this is referred to as pre or before writing. Note that these are interchangeable, meaning that you might return to previous steps. You might choose a topic, but not really have decided upon your idea or your opinion about that topic yet. So you might do a bit of brainstorming and a bit of research. You might come back to your topic and then decide what your argument or your main idea is going to be in relation to that. Then you might go ahead and do some organization, and then you might go back to brainstorming and researching. So they are interchangeable. Now, after the pre-writing, we move to drafting. And at the stage when you're going to write, you really should know already what you're going to write. So go ahead and you can now write what is referred to as your first draft. You want to then actually check and decide if any changes need to be made. And in this case, once again, you might go back to the pre-writing steps. You might decide that maybe some further research or some further brainstorming is required. You might want to adjust the organization. This then would result in your second draft. You can repeat this process and have a third draft, a fourth draft, however many you need, until you are satisfied, until you are happy with what you have produced. Then you need to proofread your work. Now, technically, proofreading means quite simply spelling and grammar checking. So check the spelling and the grammar. Now, the process of changing drafts and proofreading all taken together is referred to as editing. And the process of writing and editing taken together is referred to as drafting. Now, the final stage is to submit your work, to hand it in. Now, this sounds simple enough, but actually often even a simple text message can be incorrectly submitted. So, for example, if you have a poor connection and your message isn't actually sent, but you didn't check, and you might come back to your messenger service and find that the message you intended to send yesterday hasn't actually been sent because at the time there wasn't a good Wi-Fi connection around you. Now, there are other common errors which can be made. So these include things like making sure that your work that you are submitting is in the format required. And this means the style that your teacher or your institution wants. For example, if they ask you to use Times New Roman font size 12 with double line spacing, then that's what you should do. Also, in the way required, they might ask you to hand it in as a print format in class. They might ask you to email it, or they might ask you to deposit into some kind of online resource. Also, to the place required. If you're going to mail it or send it to an email address, sometimes people get these wrong. So double check and make sure that you've got the correct email that you're sending it to. And finally, by the time required. Often we have deadlines for these kinds of things, so make sure that you submit it by the deadline. Now remember from our previous lecture that written communication is the most difficult kind of communication. We have no body language. We have no vocal variety available to assist us. So be very careful about what you're actually going to write and follow the writing process in all of your written communications to make sure that the message is communicated accurately. Now, when you're writing, it is customary to show when you are changing topic. A change in topic occurs when the person, the place, the time, or the idea which you are discussing is being changed in a way which is quite noteworthy, quite notable. Now, the way that we show this change is by using paragraphs, by paragraphing, and each particular paragraph therefore represents a different topic. Now, you may write about a single topic for a brief time, or you might write about it for a longer time, for an extended period. And as a result, a paragraph can actually be extremely short, even one sentence. For example, if you have an email that you're sending and the first sentence is a simple greeting, then that is your paragraph. Or it can be very, very long, such as several sentences discussing one particular aspect of that message. So the next question is, how do we actually show these paragraphs? Now, the forms which are used for paragraphing have actually evolved quite a lot over time. In the past, in Europe, documents were written on what is called parchment, and parchment is really quite basically dried animal skin. Now, this was very expensive, as you can imagine, and quite difficult actually to produce. So the space on the parchment was itself at a premium. It was very expensive, and they didn't want to actually waste any space, if at all possible. But they did want to show these changes in topics as well. So there are a couple of ways that they used to do this. Scribes, or people who used to write most of these works by hand in many cases, would use what are known as litterae notabiliore, and these are enlarged letters. And you can see some of them as examples on the bottom left picture, not the very first one, but throughout the rest of the document, you can see that there are larger letters which are being used to show that this is a new paragraph. Now, the other method is the pilcrow, which you can see the symbol for there. And this was commonly used in slightly altered forms, in a variety of different forms, as the shape of the pilcrow itself evolved. And you can see examples of pilcrows at the very start of the document on the bottom left, and then another form of a pilcrow being used throughout the document on the bottom right. Now, paper was introduced about 700 years ago. At first, of course, it was very expensive, but nowadays it's very, very cheap. So space is no longer a problem. So the pilcrow itself has, for the most part, been replaced. And instead, in modern times, there are two methods which are generally used to show that we are changing paragraphs or changing topics. And here you can see an example of the first method, which is to indent. And this is simply to leave a space actually at the beginning of the paragraph to show that this is going to be a new paragraph. If you're using a computer, you can easily do this just by hitting the Tab key, and that will give you your indentation. Now, this method is traditionally used for modern academic paragraphing. Now, the second method is more commonly used throughout the professional world, and this is simply to leave a space between one group of sentences and the next group of sentences to show that this is a paragraph. And in this case, you don't need an indentation because the space itself is showing that there is a new paragraph. And this is actually probably the most common method which is used in written communications these days. Now, know that your teachers or your professors might prefer one method above the other method, so you might want to ask them which method they prefer, simply for the sake of getting better grades. Now, longer paragraphs will typically begin with what is known as a topic sentence, and this will contain the topic for that paragraph and then the main idea, which is what is being said or what is being argued about that particular topic. Now, this is done so that the reader can immediately understand what the core or essential message of this paragraph is going to be. They shouldn't need to guess what this paragraph is going to talk about. You should immediately indicate what the paragraph is going to talk about by starting your paragraphs with this topic sentence. Now, this will be followed by supporting sentences, and I say that in the plural because there should generally be more than one. And these sentences will go to support the main idea. You're not going to talk randomly about the topic. It's the main idea actually which is important. This is what you are going to write about. Now, there are several methods which can be used for you to support this main idea. You can give examples, you can provide details or explanations, and you might even use quotations. So let's take a look at some of these. So for facts, you could provide statistics, for example. You could indicate scientific truths. You could talk about a proven event. For details, these are giving specifics about a general statement. For explanations, this is telling what something means or perhaps how it works. For examples, you would be describing an event which can be used to support your main idea. And then for quotations, you're using the words of another well-respected person which will go to support your main idea. Now, the last sentence in one of these longer paragraphs is usually the concluding sentence. And this will typically paraphrase the topic sentence, or perhaps add a final thought on the topic, but without introducing any new ideas. So looking at the methods then, a restatement is simply paraphrasing, saying again using slightly different words. So you're saying essentially the same thing, you're just changing the structure or changing the words that you're using. That's paraphrasing. And you can do that with your topic sentence. Another method is to make a prediction, and this is to predict the future related to your paragraph's topic and idea. A recommendation is to inform people of actions that perhaps they can or maybe they should take. An opinion is simply stating your opinion, your final opinion about the topic and the idea which you have discussed. And finally, an overview is summarising the main points which you have made in support of your main idea. Now note that if you have a shorter paragraph, then you might actually omit this final concluding sentence. And this would be because actually in those cases, the topic and the main idea has only been introduced a couple of sentences before, so the reader likely remembers what your topic and main idea are, which were contained in your topic sentence. Now, for these longer paragraphs, these academic paragraphs which we're talking about here, these will typically range from between 100 to 300 or so words in length. Essays, assignments, and journal articles are quite simply collections of paragraphs. Now, an essay will be composed of three key paragraph types. The first would be an introduction, and there will be only one paragraph of an introduction. And then you'll have several paragraphs which all are body paragraphs. And finally, you will have a conclusion. Now, the introduction will include things like a thesis statement, which will outline the topic and the controlling idea for the whole essay. Each body paragraph begins with its own topic sentence in support of this thesis statement, in support of the controlling idea. And then the conclusion will typically begin with a paraphrased thesis statement. So you're going to say the thesis statement again, just using a different structure or different words. Now, essays will not contain any subheadings, and typically an academic essay will be about 5 paragraphs in length and probably between 600 and perhaps 1,500 words in length, depending on the complexity of the thesis statement. Now, we're going to explore a little bit later the full structure of an essay, because in the 7th lecture, when we talk about the art of rhetoric, or how to create and prepare and deliver a speech, we will in fact be using this structure for developing speeches. Assignments are typically longer than essays, and they do use subheadings, each of which might contain several paragraphs rather than just the one that you saw in the essay. Now, it will usually start with a subheading of introduction, which will contain, once again, a thesis. And this will be followed by further subheadings for each of the main arguments in the body section, and then a final subheading entitled, probably, conclusion. Assignments will typically range from between 1,500 up to 5,000 words in length, again, depending on the complexity of the thesis. Now, journal articles are essentially assignments which contain new research in a specific field of study, which are written for an academic journal of some kind. So they are written for publication in the wider world. Now, each journal has its own specific requirements for the precise style of submissions for this publication. But in general, all of these publications, all journal articles, will contain an abstract. And an abstract will summarize the thesis, or sometimes called the hypothesis, which is being tested in the research, and the methods used for this research, and then the findings, the results of the research. Now, this abstract will be followed by essentially the core of the paper itself. So the abstract acts as a form of summary. And this will be followed by an introductory section, an introduction, which would be a subheading. Possibly it might include, depending on the type of journal or the type of research being conducted, sections such as literature review or theoretical framework. There would then likely be a methodology section for non-scientific journals or a materials and methods section for scientific fields. The findings will then be detailed in a results section, and this will typically be followed by a conclusion and or possibly a discussion section as well. And then lastly, there will be a references or a bibliography section, which will detail other journal articles or other sources which were relied upon in this research or mentioned in this research. So for all kinds of writing, for paragraphs, you'll have a beginning, a middle, and an end. The beginning is the topic sentence, which contains the topic and the main idea, which is what you're writing about, followed by the middle, which is the supporting sentences, and the end, which is the concluding sentence. For essays, this is several paragraphs. The first will be the introduction, and then you'll have several body paragraphs, which is the middle part, and the end of your story is the concluding paragraph. For assignments and journal articles, you are essentially putting paragraphs into different subcategories. So the introduction might contain several paragraphs. The body of your research or your assignment article will contain maybe several subheadings and several paragraphs in each of those as well. And then you'll end with some kind of conclusion. So it's essentially like writing a story. All stories, because we are related and bound to time, have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Let's take a closer look then at the skills. And the first skill we're going to look at is paraphrasing. As I mentioned, to paraphrase means to say something which has been said before, but you're using different words or a different word order. However, you are still keeping the main meaning, the core meaning of what you have said before. Now, paraphrasing is done a lot, especially in academic writing. We often paraphrase information that we have researched, such as direct quotations, which we might want to use actually when we come to talking about that particular topic. Also, we commonly, as you've seen, paraphrase topic sentences or thesis statements that we've previously used in our own writing in either concluding sentences or in conclusions. Now, when paraphrasing, it's important to make the new form quite distinct, quite different from the original form. You don't want to just copy and paste. You want to make it a little bit different, but you also want to make sure that the core meaning of what you want to say is being kept. Credibility is another skill. What do we mean by credibility? Well, we mean that you need to be able to understand how credible, how believable actually research which you will find is. Because you don't want to use research which is not credible, which nobody can believe, because you're using this information to support your thesis or your topic sentence, your idea within your particular writing. So you want to be able to use sources which are credible. So the quality of the information being used is extremely important. Good quality information is that which is trustworthy, because trustworthy information is easily believable. You are going to be able to convince your readers of your arguments. So here we have a list of the most credible to the least credible kinds of sources that you can use to support your main idea. Now, the most credible is a journal article. And the reason this is credible is because it's written by an expert or experts in their particular field of study, and usually peer reviewed, which means other researchers, other professors, and a lot of these are written by professors at university or researchers in research institutions, will have actually reviewed this research to confirm that it is accurate, that it is correct. So this is the best and the most credible, the most trustworthy kind of information that you can find, journal articles which are peer reviewed. The next is an expert opinion. And this will be an opinion given by an expert in their particular field of study. Now, these might sometimes be found in blogs or online posts which have been authored by a researcher or a professor talking about their particular field of study. Someone who's an expert in one field, understand, may not be an expert in another. So as long as they are talking about their particular field of study, then that would be an expert opinion. The next most credible would be an academic book. And the reason these are credible are because these are actually generally written by experts in their field. So a lot of academic books will be written by professors, they'll be written by researchers, or perhaps people who are working or within that particular field. So these are quite credible as well. Another credible source is an encyclopedia, and this is because the contributors to the encyclopedia are experts. Understand, though, that Wikipedia is not an encyclopedia that is a credible source, because anybody can contribute to Wikipedia, including laymen or people who are not experts, and they can add or create entries within Wikipedia itself. So other encyclopedias, though, they actually ask people who are experts to write just a small portion of the encyclopedia in order to actually get that particular information. So encyclopedias, generally speaking, are good sources of information. Governmental publications. Now here we're starting to get into a little bit more dangerous waters, because governmental publications really are reliable only if the methods of collecting and then the methods of interpreting the data on which they rely are accurate. And often they are not, unfortunately, because they are subject to administrative error, and also they are subject to political will. The government might actually prefer the publication to show a different result than the one that they found, and they might alter the results in order to keep the government happy. Now, intergovernmental publications are even less reliable than governmental publications, and this is because now we have data which is coming from many different countries which were already subject to the chances or possibilities of administrative errors and the possibility that political will has played a factor in the alteration of the data or the results. And now we have all of this data with already potential errors in it accumulated into one particular article. So there is the possibility of a multiplication of errors and falsifications. Now, getting towards the bottom of what is credible, we now have news organizations. Now, though many people would like to think that news organizations are unbiased, the truth of the matter is that often opinions are being advocated by news organizations, presented as facts, often with no sources given. They might say an expert said this. Who exactly is the expert? Often the author is not even given for many of these articles, so you don't even know who actually wrote it. And typically these are very highly propagandized, especially in relation to political content. For example, who's the good guy and who's the bad guy in a particular war. These will be very, very politicized. And last on the list, we have a layman's opinion. What is a layman? A layman is a non-expert. So these are opinions from people who are not experts in that particular field. And if you don't know what you're talking about, then your opinion is simply not that credible. So these are quite easy to dismiss. Another way to take a look at credibility is through the type of source that you're looking at. And here we have three categories. The first is primary sources, and these are sources which come from the horse's mouth. These are original works without any supplementary commentary and without any additional analysis. So examples might include research-based journal articles, some governmental publications, original writings, the actual writings themselves, such as novels or poems, original artwork, original photographs, and the like. So these are then primary sources because they are essentially what the original collection or work was. Secondary sources are those which then analyze or then comment on those primary sources. So examples here might include non-research-based journal articles, most academic textbooks, most histories, most encyclopedias, some news articles, and some political commentaries. And finally, we have tertiary sources, and these are those which collect, index, or summarize either primary or secondary or both sources. Now, often tertiary sources will have no specific author other than for journal articles which might review research or the state of research up to that particular point. Now, these kinds of things might include dictionaries, guidebooks, handbooks, Wikipedia, and other similar kinds of works. So you've probably guessed that primary sources are clearly the best kind of sources to use, secondary sources are the second best, and tertiary sources are the worst kind of sources to use. Wikipedia, as a general note, might be a good source of general knowledge about a subject, a starting point when you are conducting your research, but it is not going to be a credible source for you to use in your academic work. Now, objectivity is another important quality which you should try to have when you are approaching a topic for the purposes of research. Now, objectivity means that you should try to put aside any already formed opinions about that topic, because these opinions are what we call subjective, related to the subject or the person themselves. You should then try to objectively assess the evidence and assess the research in order to form an objective opinion based on your research findings alone. So you need to try to put aside your preconceived notions, your preconceived ideas, the ideas and notions that you already have, and try to approach the research that you're doing with a blank slate, tabula rasa. Now, to summarize means to reduce in length by expressing the most important aspects and the most important ideas in a short and clear way. And you want to be able to summarize a lot of the research. You don't want to just copy and paste. Often it's going to be way too long for you to do that. Now, this is a very useful skill because you do need to actually succinctly and clearly, concisely actually put the ideas that you have researched down into your own words and then express those ideas in your own words. Now, a lot of what you would have been doing when you're researching is collecting sources or supporting arguments which can then go to actually help you to convince your readers of the merits or the strengths of your idea. Now, once you've collected these sources, you want to actually be able to reference your sources. And being able to correctly reference or correctly cite other people's, or sometimes even your own work if it's contained in another document, is very important, because this is how we avoid any accusations of plagiarism. So what is plagiarism? Well, plagiarism is where another person's words or ideas or works are used while pretending that they are in fact your own works. Now, plagiarism is very, very important and a very, very important thing for you to avoid. It can actually mean the end of a person's academic reputation and often the end of a person's career if they are in fact accused and found to have plagiarized other people's works. Be very aware that actually in modern times, to make teachers' lives easier and cheaters' lives more difficult, there are many types of computer software driven plagiarism tools which teachers and professors can use, which will show which parts of a document that you have sent may have actually been plagiarized. And these are quite accurate tools. So make sure that if you are using other people's words, if you're using other people's ideas, that you are referencing them. Now, how do you reference and how do you avoid plagiarism? You simply have to say who the true author is of that idea, of those words, of that work. And we do that with these references. References show the reader that you're not pretending that the idea or the work is your own, that you are, and you're also providing the reader with an easy way of finding the source material and looking at it if they want to. Now, the kind of information which requires citations you can see in the table below. So you need a citation if you are quoting from, paraphrasing, or summarising another's words or ideas, or if you're using an image, a chart, or a diagram which was made by somebody else. You don't need a citation, though, if you are using your own thoughts, your own ideas, opinions, observations, or your own experimental results. Also, you don't need a citation if you are using common knowledge. What is common knowledge? Well, common knowledge is that which a person would know, or most people would know, in the particular field which you are writing about. So if you are an expert in physics, for example, and you're writing about physics, then common knowledge would be things in physics that most people working in your field would know about. Everybody knows this. It's common knowledge. You don't need to cite it. Now, for the form of references, how do you actually show this reference? There are many schemes and styles which are in fact used. The most commonly used style for social science subjects, such as psychology or sociology, is that employed by the American Psychological Association. And more commonly, this is simply called APA style. Now, the Modern Language Association, MLA style, is typically used for humanities subjects, such as mathematics or literature. And science subjects such as physics or chemistry will often use the Chicago style. Now, some styles are very specialized, such as the style of the American Medical Association, the AMA style, which is used specifically for medicine. Now, it may be in university that your teachers might prefer you to use a particular style. They might actually ask you to do your referencing in APA style or MLA style. As a note, by the way, what are these styles? Well, these are the way referencing is done for these particular journals. So the American Psychological Association has a journal, and they publish their journal regularly, and they request and require all of the authors who want to publish there to use their particular style. The same with the MLA style, the Chicago style, the American Medical Association. These are all journal styles. Now, you can find full guides for all these styles quite easily on the internet, and you will probably need to find a guide for individual references, as you'll see shortly. So if you want to have a look in more detail at APA style, simply type APA style into an internet search engine. Now, in all styles, an indication that the words, idea, or the data has been sourced from another place is actually placed in the text itself, so within your writing. And this will be directly after the end of the sentence with that source information. And this will be in the form of either a simple number, which is called a numeric citation, a numbered footnote, which is called a note citation, or a family name with either publication year or page number, and sometimes and page number for that particular source. And this is known as a parenthetical citation. Here we can see different citation types and which styles they would be associated with, which common styles. So parenthetical citations, you can see, are used in APA and MLA style. So in APA style, in order to cite within the text itself, you will give the author's last name and then the year of publication and possibly the page number as well. Now you place these in parentheses or brackets at the end of the sentence containing the source, dividing the two. So you'll have the author's last name followed by a comma and then the year of publication, dividing them with a comma. For MLA style, you'll give the author's last name and then the page number. Place these again in parentheses, so put them in brackets, and at the end of the sentence containing the source once again, dividing the two with commas. Now for note citations, the most common style used is the Chicago style. And here you will place a numbered footnote, usually in superscript, directly in your text after the source, with the footnote then containing detailed information. And then for a numeric citation, an example would be AMA style. You number your sources alphabetically in a full reference section at the end of your work, and then you use the correct number, usually in superscript, in your text. Citations may make use of certain abbreviated Latin expressions to make referencing easier in certain situations while still being clear, while maintaining clarity. So let's take a look at some examples. So the Latin expression ibidem, abbreviated to ibid, means in the same place. When do we use this? Well, it means the citation is the same as the one immediately preceding it. So if you have just used the same source and you're using it again, you can actually put ibid with a full stop after it, and that will show that it's the same as the immediately previous source. Loco citato, loc-cit, means in the place cited, and you can use this if the citation is the same as one given earlier, but it is not immediately the one that you just gave the time before. Opere citato, op-cit, means in the work cited, and this is used when the citation is the same as one given earlier, but the place, the page number, for example, is different. So you would put op-cit and then change the page number. Et alia, et al means and others. Now this we use if there are many authors, many writers of a work, typically equal to or greater than 3, depending on the journal style that you're using. The first author only is written, and then you put et al, meaning and others. And this is typically done in parenthetical citations, though a full list is usually contained in the references section at the end, depending on the style you're using. Conferatum, cf, means compare, and we'll use this when we're making a point in a work which is being compared to what is being said. Passim is literally written as passim, and this means everywhere. And this means used in place of page numbers where the source makes the points throughout. So instead of putting the actual page number, you're putting passim, meaning this is the main point that is being made throughout this entire work. Now, this in-text reference is then followed at the end of your writing with a fuller section which contains detailed information about the source in the specific format which is characteristic of that journal style that you're using. This will allow the reader to then find and look at the source in detail if they desire to. Now, this end section is often called references, or bibliography, or citations, or the works cited section. The name is often dependent on the style. So let's take a look then at how we would go about doing all of this together, how to create this reference. Let's imagine that we wish to paraphrase a journal article and what has been claimed in this journal article. So we paraphrase it, and let me just read the paraphrase that we're going to create. So quite early on in the development of coronavirus vaccines, it was observed in animal trials that Th2 type immunopathology issues resulted from vaccination with 4 different types of vaccines against SARS-CoV, leading the authors to advise caution before proceeding to human trials. So first we need the in-text citation. APA style, this is a parenthetical citation. So after human trials, we would open a bracket, and inside there we would have Tseng et al. And others, comma, and then 2012, the year of publication. Close the parentheses and then put your full stop. Now, for the full references section, at the end, we have a full list of the authors, family name, comma, initial for the first name, full stop, comma, and then list all of the authors. After that, we have the year of publication, 2012, and then we have the title of the journal article. Immunization with SARS coronavirus vaccines leads to pulmonary immunopathology on challenge with the SARS virus. Full stop. And then we have the name of the journal itself in italics, PLOS 1. And then we have volume number, page number, 11, full stop. And then the DOI, which is the internet source where we can find this article. MLA style would be slightly different. So we'll use MLA note style for the parenthetical citation. This would be human trials, open your bracket, Tseng et al, full stop, and then number 11, page number. Close the bracket. For the full citation, which is usually called works cited, then we would have the family name Tseng, and then the full first name, and then et al. Quotation marks for the title of this article, and then we have PLOS 1, the name of the journal, volume 7, number 8, April 2012, page 11, and then the DOI. Each style is very specific. You need to be following the exact format. For Chicago style, we'll have a number in text. For example, human trials, full stop. And then let's imagine that this is going to be number 1. So we'll put it as number 1. And then we would have the full note. So this would be contained on the same page where this in-text citation is on, at the bottom, usually as a footnote of some kind. The first time you use this reference, you need to do a full note, and then the second time you can do a repeat note, which is the second one that you can see there. So the format again is slightly different. In this case, we have the first name first, and then the family name, and then et al. And then we have a comma, not a full stop, and then we open our quotation marks. We've got the title. We've got, once again in italics, the journal name, +1. We have 7, number 8, April 2012, the date at the end, and then a colon, page 11. And then we have the DOI. Now, some of that is omitted for repeated notes, as you can see there. We just have Tseng et al., and then we have the name of the article, followed by the page number. And then right at the bottom, we have the full reference, which would go in the bibliography. Usually it's called a bibliography for Chicago, in the bibliography section at the end of your writing. And there, as you can see, we have Tseng, and then which is the family name, and then the first name, and then in the same way, family name, comma, first name, comma, family name, and so on, of all of the authors here. And then you can see that we have actually immunization with SARS-CoV. So we have the full title again. We have +1, the journal name, number 7, number 8, and then April 2012. And then we have the page number 11 and the DOI. Now, an interesting thing to notice here is that the first name of the author, Tseng, is the family name, followed by Chen Te, which is actually the first name of that author. Now, note that for the second, third, fourth authors, here actually you've inverted. So you've got the first name first and then the family name, and there are no commas dividing the two. Whereas just with the first author, you have the family name first and then a comma and then their first name. So AMA numbering style, you would have a number after your text citation. And then for the full references section, you can see the style is slightly different. So you have family name and then initial with no full stop after it, comma, family name initial for all of the authors there. And then you have the title of the author, and once again, all of the information about the journal and the DOI. Now, the styles used, as you can see, are very specific. You need to get all of those full stops and commas in the right places. You need to get the names in the right orders, and so on. And in addition to that, the style is very specific depending on whether you are referencing a journal, as the example that we just went through was, or it'll be slightly different if you're referencing a book or a newspaper, or if the format is online, or if it's offline, or if there is no author or many authors, as you can see. So it is very important for you to actually check the exact formatting which is required in the style that you're using for each and every reference. And this does, and I'll say there's no way around this, this does take a long, long time to do, and it does take a lot of effort to get it all absolutely right. But fortunately, once again, you can easily search on the internet for the style, and then you can check the specific style for whether it's a book or a newspaper or whatever source that you're using, and it will show you how to do it for each specific one. Now, it's worth noting that we often make use of other Latin abbreviations in our writing, though not directly in the context of referencing. And it's worth knowing these ones. So some common examples are exempli gratia, e.g. And this means for example, in which case you'll use it to give examples. Id est, I.e. Means that is, meaning. So here you would use it to say what I mean is this. Circum or circa, c. means approximately. And you might use this for a year. For example, if you're not sure of the year, you might say circa or just c. And then that is the approximate year. Etc. etc. means and the others. So if you give some examples, you might follow that with etc., etc., which means that there are many others as well. Now, in relation to years, you can use Anno Domini, AD, sometimes written with full stops and sometimes without, and this means the year of our Lord. So at the moment, as of speaking, we are in 2023 AD. BC means before Christ. BCE is before current era, and CE is current era. Now, if you prefer, you can use these in place of AD and BC. So instead of using BC, you can use BCE. The meaning is exactly the same. And instead of using AD, you can use CE. The meaning is exactly the same. They are not actually from Latin, but they are used for years in the same way. Let's take a look at some examples of these uses. And with the examples that I give, I have actually put a color scale to help you understand the grammar a little bit. So red is your subject, that is what is actually acting on the verb. So here, there, and then blue is your verb, there are, and then many different animals. This is your subject complement in grayscale, meaning the be verb and other linking verbs often act like saying equals. So this is telling you what the subject is. So there are many different mammals. For example, e.g., cats, dogs, apes, deer. Mammals are viviparous, which means, i.e., that means they give birth to live babies. Green is object, and the slightly dark yellow there means it's a prepositional phrase. Mammals first appeared on Earth circa 154 million BC. So approximately 154 million BC before Christ. Let's summarize. When you're writing, you always want to apply the writing process to anything that you write, especially if it's very long, but also especially if it's very short. Now, understand that a paragraph simply represents a change in topic, and that you can actually change paragraphs even after a single sentence if you're changing topic. Academic paragraphs, though, are usually longer, and academic paragraphs will include a topic sentence which contains the topic and the main idea. The main idea is what you want to say about that topic, and the main idea is what you will write about. And you will support that main idea with supporting sentences, all going to support it, and then you'll end your academic paragraph with a concluding sentence, often simply paraphrasing your topic sentence. Essays, assignments, and journal articles are simply collections of paragraphs which are being used for specific purposes and may be submitted in a variety of different styles, depending on the preferences of the journal that you're writing for or the preferences of the teacher that you are writing for. Now, you should practice skills such as being objective, meaning try to put your own personal opinion aside when you are doing your research. Make sure when you're researching that you're looking for credible sources. Are these believable and trustworthy sources? And then you should be able to summarize the information that you've gained in your research and paraphrase these sources when you have decided that you're going to use them. Always be aware that plagiarism can destroy your academic career and your working career as well. You don't want to be accused of plagiarism. Being unaccusable of plagiarism is simply a matter of referencing your sources. So make sure that you're always keeping a note of all of your research sources so that you can fully and properly reference them as required by your teacher or your professor. And that brings to an end our discussion on academic writing and this unit of academia. Thank you once again for your attention.